Late evening on November 20th, 1998. A quiet apartment stairwell in Saint Petersburg becomes the grim stage for a brutal national political execution. Two bodies lie shattered on the cold concrete steps, their lives violently altered in a barrage of near-silent gunfire from a shadowy assassin. Galina Starovoitova, a prominent voice for democratic reform, is dead, while her assistant Ruslan Linkov desperately clings to survival in the dark. The weapon, discarded in a frantic rush, rests near the entryway, still radiating a faint heat into the freezing Russian winter air. A mysterious shadow slips through the heavy iron courtyard gates, vanishing instantly into the freezing, dark labyrinth of the St. Petersburg streets. Who drew the blueprints for this meticulous assassination? And what hidden forces demanded the silence of one of Russia's boldest politicians? To understand the gravity of this fatal night, we must peel back the layers of post-Soviet chaos that gripped the nation's heart. Born in Leningrad in 1946, Galina Starovoitova grew up within a city deeply scarred by history, fostering her profound sense of human responsibility. As an academic specializing in ethnology, she monitored the fragile, shifting ethnic relationships that simmered beneath the surface of the Soviet Union. Her scholarly research gradually transformed into a passionate pursuit of human rights, standing against state-sponsored discrimination and rising systemic violence. During Mikhail Gorbachev's perestroika era, her voice echoed fiercely, demanding deep structural adjustments rather than mere technical modifications to the state. By the late 1980s, the Soviet Union faced imminent collapse, and Starovoitova emerged as a central pillar for democratic reform. Entering the state Duma as an elected deputy, she aggressively targeted the corrupted networks infiltrating Russia's fragile new political landscape. St. Petersburg in the 1990s became a perilous battleground, where politics, private business, and ruthless organized crime syndicates fused completely. She frequently denounced the opaque remnants of old Soviet security agencies, believing true democracy impossible without their comprehensive internal overhaul. Her uncompromising crusade earned profound admiration from reformists, but generated intense, dangerous resentment among those thriving within the shadows. Anonymous warnings began arriving through untraceable letters and ominous late-night phone calls, creating a constant, suffocating aura of hidden surveillance. Despite the escalating danger, she refused permanent professional security, walking through her daily routine with an incredibly vulnerable openness. As the 1999 parliamentary elections loomed, her political momentum surged, positioning her as a primary target for liquidation. The dynamic between raw ideological reform and hidden criminal syndicates had reached an absolute, explosive breaking point by late November. Returning from a high-stakes trip to Moscow, she landed in St. Petersburg, entirely unaware that her final hours were ticking away. Her assistant Ruslan Linkov stayed close, navigating the dark streets as their vehicle approached the Griboyedov Canal apartment building. Inside the cold entryway of at crime_scene_Maine, a cold-blooded trap was already set, engineered with military precision and silent malice. The shooter stood hidden on the upper landing, a weapon held steady in featureless hands, waiting for the heavy outer door to click. At exactly 22:45, the iron door opened, and Starovoitova stepped over the threshold into the dim, freezing stairwell. The assassin moved down a single step, minimizing the distance to less than 3 meters, erasing any chance of escape. No words were exchanged as the silenced weapon flashed, punching terminal rounds directly into the Democratic leader's head. She collapsed instantly onto the freezing stone, her vital function ceasing before her body even settled against the handrail. Turning instantly, the gunman targeted Linkov, firing repeatedly and leaving him severely mutilated on the floor before fleeing. Leaving 2 devastating casualties behind, the operative vanished into the St. Petersburg night, triggering a massive, decade-long federal investigation. The echo of gunfire inside the narrow stairwell dies out instantly, replaced by the heavy, suffocating silence of the freezing Saint Petersburg night. Outside the apartment building, heavy snow continues to fall silently, blanketing the dark embankment and covering the fresh footprints left by the operative. Minutes feel like agonizing hours as the cold air hardens the dark, ink-like pool spreading beneath the motionless body of the Democratic deputy. A neighbor on the third floor cautiously cracks open a wooden door, listening directly into the dense, frozen dark of the hallway. The sudden, piercing wail of approaching emergency sirens violently shatters the stillness of the Griboyedov Canal area, signaling the start of the response. The first patrol unit arrives at the iron gate, their heavy boots crunching loudly on the fresh, unblemished layers of Russian snow. Officers rush through the dark courtyard, their flashlights cutting sharp, frantic beams of cold white light through the thick winter haze. Pushing the heavy entrance door open, the initial responders step immediately into the horrific reality waiting on the lower concrete landing. A senior officer checks for a pulse on the fallen politician, finding only the absolute coldness of a life completely extinguished. Beside her, Ruslan Linkov lets out a low, ragged breath, his featureless head moving slightly as he clings desperately to his life. Medics enter the narrow space with a heavy canvas stretcher, working frantically under the harsh, unstable light of the stairwell bulb. They slowly lift the bleeding assistant, careful not to worsen the severe trauma inflicted upon his neck and upper jaw area. Rushing back through the courtyard, the rescue team carries the critical witness toward the waiting vehicle as freezing wind blows hard. The ambulance doors slam shut with a loud metallic echo, speeding away immediately toward the nearest military hospital intensive care unit. Back at the scene, senior homicide investigators from the Federal Security Service arrive, their faces tight with gravity and intense pressure. Yellow forensic tape is pulled tightly across the rusted entrance, sealing at crime_. Scene_Maine, away from the growing crowd of bewildered onlookers. A forensic photographer sets up his heavy camera, the sharp, artificial flash illuminating the concrete walls and the tragic casualties. The lens captures the exact position of the spent casings, documenting the cold mechanics of the execution for the permanent records. Investigator hands, protected by thin rubber gloves, slowly collect the discarded submachine gun, placing it inside a transparent plastic evidence bag. Every document scattered from the leather briefcase is systematically numbered and gathered, preserving the final political work of Galina Starovoitova. A detective looks closely at the peeling wall, identifying the deep impact marks left by bullets that missed their marks. The temperature inside the stairwell drops lower, causing the breath of the working investigators to form thick, translucent clouds of vapor. Meanwhile, inside the operating room of the military hospital, surgeons fight a desperate, silent battle against the catastrophic internal damage. The electronic monitor buzzes irregularly, tracking the critical fluctuations in Linkov's blood pressure and failing heart rate as they work. A surgeon's hand, holding a steel scalpel, moves with deliberate speed, clearing bone fragments from the path of the bullet. The lead doctor stops for a brief moment, staring directly at the monitor as the lifeline flattens into a single tone. With a sudden, forced manual compression, the team forcefully brings the heartbeat back, stabilizing the witness for the crucial hours ahead. Word of the assassination reaches Moscow immediately, prompting President Boris Yeltsin to issue a direct order to assume federal control. The entire political system enters a state of deep panic as fears of widespread targeted liquidations grip the government elite. Investigators now face a dense labyrinth of trilateral conflicts involving public officials, shadow businesses, and ruthless underground hitmen in St. Petersburg. 48 hours pass after the shooting, and the Special Federal Task Force finds itself staring at empty, dead-end forensic ballistics reports. The weapon left at crime_scene_Maine reveals no usable fingerprints, its serial numbers meticulously scrubbed away by an industrial grinding tool. Ballistics experts confirm the submachine gun is a rare, non-standard model favored only by highly professional underground contract execution syndicates. Every canvas of the Griboyedov Canal neighborhood yields 0 eyewitnesses, as the freezing storm had driven everyone deep inside their homes. Senior detectives map out the politicians' final movements from Moscow, analyzing plane passenger manifests for any signs of coordinated team surveillance. The thick paper file grows larger by the hour, filled with contradictory tips that lead investigators into a complex, dark swamp. Outside the federal security headquarters, a dense gray winter fog rolls heavily across the Neva River, matching the grim mood inside. A lead investigator paces tightly inside his dim office, his featureless white head silhouetted sharply against a moisture-stained window pane. He stops to aggressively crush a half-burned cigarette into a rusted tin ashtray, venting his intense frustration into the dark. The political pressure from Moscow intensifies daily, with urgent encoded teletype messages demanding immediate arrests arriving at the local precinct. Every known Saint Petersburg criminal informant is systematically brought into at police_station. Yet the dark underground underworld remains completely silent. The case appears completely stalled until a sudden, urgent phone call from the military hospital intensive care unit disrupts the silence. Inside the heavily guarded medical wing, Ruslan Linkov slowly opens his eyes, breaking through the deep, drug-induced chemical fog. 2 federal agents stand alert at the foot of his bed, notepad and pen ready to record his first words. The assistant attempts to speak, but his severely shattered jaw allows only a low, agonizingly distorted sound to escape his throat. An agent gently places a clean clipboard and a dark graphite pencil into his trembling, featureless white hand. With immense physical effort, the witness begins scratching crude Russian characters onto the blank white surface of the paper. The tip of the pencil snaps under his desperate grip, forcing a brief, tense pause inside the sterile hospital room. The agent replaces it immediately, leaning closer to decode the raw, fragmented description of the hitman waiting in the dark. Linkov writes about a second operative hiding nearby, a female presence who acted as the primary lookout inside the stairwell. She had used a portable handheld radio transceiver to broadcast their arrival, coordinating the precise timing of the deadly ambush. This critical revelation completely changes the investigation, proving the execution was organized by a multi-person operational cell rather than a lone gunman. Detectives immediately shift focus to regional telecommunication towers, checking intercepted cellular signals around the canal area during that specific night. Technicians slowly filter through thousands of data logs, looking for unusual frequencies utilized near the victim's residential building. A breakthrough emerges when a suspicious electronic signal is traced back to an illegal, unregistered radio unit operating in the city. The digital trace links directly to a local security firm, controlled by a powerful underworld figure named Yuri Kolchin. Kolchin, a former Secret Service operative turned private shadow enforcer, possessed the exact tactical knowledge required for this hit. His private office on the edge of St. Petersburg is immediately placed under round-the-clock covert federal wiretap and counterintelligence surveillance. Agents hidden inside a plain commercial delivery van record hours of coded conversations drifting from the target compound. The fragmented verbal jigsaw puzzle slowly comes together, revealing the terrifying blueprint of a multi-tiered professional political assassination conspiracy. The federal task force commander signs the top-secret arrest warrants for Yuri Kolchin, his heavy fountain pen leaving a deep black imprint. Midnight approaches as 5 heavily armored tactical transport vehicles slowly depart the federal compound, their dark shapes cutting through the heavy snow. Freezing winter wind patterns violently coat the windshields, turning the headlights into dim, diffused yellow beams across the icy, empty roads. Inside the lead vehicle, Tactical operators adjust their heavy gear in complete silence, the rhythmic clicking of metal buckles echoing sharply. A senior special agent checks the action of his standard-issue pistol, ensuring the mechanical parts slide without a single obstruction. The targeted security firm compound looms in the dark distance, surrounded by high concrete walls topped with rusted iron wires. Tactical trucks quietly extinguish their lights 2 blocks away, deploying operators into the deep, unblemished drifts of frozen Russian snow. An operative cautiously approaches the outer brick wall, raising a heavy steel hydraulic cutter toward the thick iron chain lock. With a sharp, compressed metallic snap, the heavy chain breaks, dropping heavy iron links silently into the soft winter snow cushion. The team slips through the narrow opening, their flashlights casting short, controlled white circles across the snow-dusted industrial courtyard steps. Inside the central building office, Yuri Kolchin sits calmly behind a large mahogany desk, counting stacks of high-denomination currency banknotes. His featureless white fingers move with systematic precision, sliding the paper bills across the polished wood without a single trace of worry. A heavy steel security door nearby suddenly buckles inward under the immense explosive force of a tactical breaching charge tool. Operators flood the interior space instantly, their loud, synthesized command shouts cutting violently through the sudden, dense smoke cloud haze. Kolchin reaches aggressively toward a hidden desk drawer, but a red laser targeting dot locks sharply onto his chest fabric. Operative hands forcefully slam him onto the polished wood, pinning his featureless face directly against the uncounted stacks of cash. Heavy steel handcuffs are forcefully clicked around his wrists, securing the prime organization suspect of the national political conspiracy. He is dragged out into the freezing courtyard night, his heavy leather boots dragging limply through the dark slush channels. Simultaneously, federal agents enter a secondary brick apartment block across the city, executing a coordinated raid on his core hitmen. A wooden door is smashed to pieces with a heavy battering ram, revealing a dark, cluttered hideout room inside. Inside, a muscular suspect attempts to scramble toward a frozen window frame, but is instantly tackled onto a dirty mattress. Agents secure the small room, identifying a cache of hidden communication transceivers and additional non-standard ammunition crates nearby. Every confiscated electronic item is systematically bagged and numbered, expanding the mountain of evidence against the organized criminal group. By dawn, Yuri Kolchin is brought inside police station under maximum federal security, his face remaining entirely expressionless and cold. He stares straight forward, refusing to look at the massive stacks of case files sitting on the scratch-covered desk surface. A lead interrogator sits across from him, slowly opening a thick cardboard file folder with deliberate, tensed mechanical movements. The single overhead light tube continues to buzz erratically, casting long, nervous shadows across the bare concrete wall stains. Kolchin remains completely silent during the first 4 hours of intense questioning, denying any involvement with the assassination team. The detective places a black and white crime scene photograph of the Griboyedov stairwell directly onto the table before his eyes. The battle of wills inside the small cell begins, a long, dark process that will require years to break completely. Inside the interrogation room, the federal detective slowly pushes a thick stack of intercepted radio frequency logs across the table. Yuri Kolchin remains completely motionless, his featureless white head turned slightly away from the cold documentation of his communication network. The investigator carefully uses a sharp metallic pen tip to highlight a recurring data point registered during the fatal hour. The heavy light tube overhead continues its unstable buzzing, casting harsh, trembling white patterns across the suspect's flawless, smooth skull. A secondary agent slowly opens a heavy iron locker, retrieving a clear plastic bag containing the seized communication transceiver device. The metallic device is placed heavily onto the wood, its dark antenna reflecting a sharp, cold beam of fluorescent light. The detective leans forward tightly, placing his featureless white hands flat on the desk surface to apply intense psychological pressure. Outside the small cell, heavy freezing rain begins to mix with snow, pattering sharply against the dark window glass panes. Inside the federal database room, computer terminals run encrypted search routines to uncover the true identity of the shooter. Thousands of tactical military records are systematically filtered, matching weapon specialization data with known shadow security enforcers in the area. A primary suspect dossier is pulled from the deep archive stacks, revealing the encrypted profile name of Vitaly Akishin. Akishin, a highly trained tactical marksman associated with Kolchin's security firm, possessed the exact lethal profile required for execution. The investigator confronts Kolchin with the newly recovered profile, dropping the official military enlistment papers onto the center table. For a fraction of a second, the crime boss's tensed fingers twitch violently against his expensive dark trousers fabric. He recovers his cold composition instantly, remaining an absolute stone wall against the weight of federal evidence presented. The detective slowly turns a mechanical audio tape recorder wheel, initiating the playback of an intercepted conversational data loop. A grainy, synthesized voice echoes sharply inside the concrete cell, discussing logistics for an operation near Griboyedov Canal. The audio record captures the precise confirmation of the target's flight arrival time from Moscow during that dark winter night. Kolchin's smooth, featureless head tilts downward by a few inches, the first structural crack in his defensive facade appearing. The lead interrogator notices the subtle shift, immediately leaning closer to deliver the heavy legal terms of state treason charges. A secondary agent logs the tensed interactions inside an official-typed notebook, his pen scratching rapidly across the white paper. The ticking of an antique wall clock inside the precinct room grows extraordinarily loud, measuring the heavy density of the silence. The crime boss slowly raises his featureless face, his posture shifting from aggressive dominance to complete, heavy, calculated resignation. He opens his throat to speak, his low, synthesized vocal fragments confirming the operational roles of the ambush team. Kolchin admits to organizing the logistics network, pointing directly to Vitaly Akishin as the prime shooter inside the stairwell. He explains how the weapon was procured through an illegal military supply warehouse channel operating near the city limits. The official confession is systematically recorded onto the magnetic tape, solidifying the federal case against the secondary execution layer. The suspect signs the typed formal admission papers, his featureless hand trembling slightly under the cold residential tube glow. With the organizer broken, the task force immediately targets the remaining tactical assets hiding inside the dark Saint Petersburg underworld. The legal trap closes fast on the assassination cell, yet the final, highest level of political command remains completely hidden. The Federal Task Force Operations Center flashes with a sudden, urgent alert as a border intelligence report flags the suspect's paper passport data. An analyst hurriedly types on a heavy computer terminal, locking the active federal search parameters onto the dark, icy northwestern regional exit routes. Official alerts reach the Kingisepp border checkpoint near Estonia immediately, ordering an absolute security lockdown on all outward traveling transport vehicles. Heavy iron barrier gates are forcefully lowered across the freezing highway, cutting the isolated outpost away from the dark Baltic wilderness path. Freezing winter storm clouds dump thick layers of snow, reducing visibility to less than 5 meters around the concrete checkpoint facility area. Border guards, accompanied by massive, heavily furred guard dogs, step out into the freezing wind to begin checking a stalled transport line. An officer raises a cold metallic flashlight beam toward the frost-covered window pane of a commercial long-distance passenger bus cabin. Inside the vehicle, multiple passengers sit completely silent and tensed, their faces obscured within the deep, dark winter clothing fabric layers. On the back row, a solitary passenger adjusts his dark wool collar, his tensed white, featureless fingers trembling slightly against the seat. The border guard climbs the vehicle steps slowly, his heavy leather boots leaving wet, dark slush patterns on the rubber floor mat. He systematically demands official identification documents from each traveler, his movements tensed and deliberate under the intense federal pressure. The officer reaches the final row, shining the cold white flashlight beam directly into the hidden face of the quiet passenger. The traveler slowly hands over a weathered identification booklet, his posture mimicking complete, calm innocence to deflect any immediate suspicion. The guard matches the paper portrait name with the top-secret federal task force list, identifying the targeted profile of Vitaly Akishin. A quiet, encoded radio signal is immediately broadcast to secondary tactical units waiting outside the commercial transport vehicle doors. 3 heavily armed tactical operators instantly board the bus, their submachine guns pointed directly down the narrow center aisle path. Akishin attempts to reach toward a hidden pocket knife tool, but heavy operative hands forcefully slam him against the window pane. The glass fractures slightly under the immense physical impact force, white frost particles scattering across his dark wool coat shoulders. Heavy iron handcuffs are forcefully clicked tightly shut around his wrists, terminating his calculated escape attempt toward the Baltic border. He is forcefully dragged down the vehicle stair steps, his heavy boots kicking up soft, wet snowdrifts into the dark. The federal convoy speeds away from the Kingisepp border outpost immediately, heading back toward the high-security cells of the central precinct. By next morning, Vitaly Akishin is brought into the tensed interrogation cell, his cuffed hands secured firmly behind his back. The lead federal detective lays out a massive array of physical evidence material collected from the Griboyedov Canal crime scene. Akishin maintains an absolute, cold, defensive silence, his smooth, white, featureless face reflecting the harsh, flickering fluorescent tube light glow. The investigator carefully slides the signed confessions of Yuri Kolchin directly onto the center table before the shooter's blank eyes. Akishin's tensed white shoulders subtly drop by a fraction of an inch, acknowledging the final collapse of his conspiracy network. He opens his throat to deliver his initial formal verbal confirmation statements, detailing the exact tactical mechanics of the ambush. An agent records the full confession onto the spinning analog tape reel, preserving the critical legal proof for state court prosecution. The shooter signs each typed admission sheet, his featureless white hand moving with slow, calculated resignation under the light glow. The operational execution layer is now entirely dismantled, allowing the special federal investigation to target the supreme judicial trial phase ahead. The federal prosecutors gather inside the Supreme Municipal Courthouse, their heavy leather portfolios filled with the finalized, ironclad assassination case files. Outside the judicial compound, an immense crowd of quiet citizens gathers in the freezing wind, demanding justice for the executed Democratic leader. Dozens of federal security officers establish a strict perimeter around the iron gates, their heavy winter boots stepping firmly into the slush. Inside the grand courtroom, a low, tensed murmur echoes continuously through the high concrete walls as the judicial panel prepares to enter. The heavy wooden witness box sits vacant under a sharp white spotlight beam, waiting for the critical survivors of the fatal ambush. A security guard forcefully pushes a heavy iron door open, leading the cuffed organization suspect, Yuri Kolchin, into the secure cell. Kolchin enters the secure iron cage enclosure, his featureless white hands resting lightly on the cold bars, with calculated, complete detachment. Immediately behind him, Vitaly Akishin is escorted inside, his broad shoulders tensed under the intense focus of the state prosecutors. The 2 co-conspirators stand side by side behind the bars, maintaining an absolute, freezing silence as the legal trial commences. The lead federal prosecutor slowly stands behind his wooden podium, adjusting a pair of thin wire glasses with tensed white fingers. He opens the official indictment document, his low, synthesized voice echoing clearly through the dense, silent space of the courtroom layout. The state presentation details the exact multi-tiered logistical organization created to permanently silence Galina Starovoitova, inside her residential building. A secondary clerk slowly places the seized non-standard submachine gun onto the central evidence display table under sharp lights. The dark metal weapon reflects the cold light tubes overhead, reminding every observer inside the room of the tragic winter execution night. The prosecutor introduces the signed forensic medical reports, documenting the 24 severe knife wounds and catastrophic ballistic impact trauma points. A tense silence hardens inside the municipal hall as the gruesome physical details of the political liquidation are systematically read aloud. On the front spectator row, the close family relatives of the deceased leader sit close together under a dim white light. The legal panel then initiates the playback of the recorded voice tapes containing the captured operational communication data loops. The grainy, synthesized verbal fragments echo through the judicial hall, confirming the precise tracking of the victim's flight from Moscow. Vitaly Akishin slowly lowers his white, featureless head by a fraction of an inch, his jaw shifting slightly behind the iron bars. The defense attorney slowly rises to present his final arguments, his featureless white hands gesturing weakly in the dim room. He points directly to the lack of identified prime political command source entities, claiming the prosecution case remains structurally incomplete. The judicial panel listens with absolute, expressionless stone faces, their heavy black robes absorbing the cold light of the hall. The lead judge slowly gathers the formal typed decision sheets, preparing to read aloud the historical verdict for the nation. The entire courtroom stands as the synthesized voice of the magistrate echoes, delivering 20 years of severe imprisonment to Yuri Kolchin. The judge sentences Vitaly Akishin to 23 years inside a high-security federal penal colony for his direct execution role. The definitive judicial sentences offer an official closure for the state prosecution, yet the true highest command remains completely hidden. The structural gap between established legal truth and historical reality leaves a permanent shadow over the legacy of the case. Galina Starovoitova remains a permanent symbol of democratic sacrifice, her tragic night at Griboyedov Canal etched forever into history. The cold winter wind continues to blow hard across the Neva River, carrying the dark, unresolved secrets into the freezing dark.